Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to another of our How a Coach Can Help series. This time we're talking about how a coach can help you win the office politics game without being political. My name is Jenny Garrett. I'm founder of Jenny Garrett Global, and I've been a coach for 20 years. Which I'm really proud of. My consultancy works across 3 areas: inclusive leadership, entrepreneurial leadership, and AI-ready leadership. But most proudly, I'm founder of the Diverse Executive Coach Directory, which is where our brilliant coaches come from today. We've now got over 50 exceptional coaches listed in the directory. Today's topic, office politics, is really just 2 words that maybe make many people cringe. It can sound manipulative, inauthentic, a bit grubby. And so a lot of people, especially those who are values driven, opt out and say things like, I don't play those games. But here's the honest thing I want you to start with. Refusing to play politics isn't neutral. It's forfeiting the field to whoever will play. And that's often not the people whose values you want shaping your decisions. Meanwhile, research from Queen Mary University of London and King's College London shows that skills like networking, building relationships, and influencing others are critical for career success. And women and those from ethnically diverse backgrounds often have less access to those informal networks and benefit less when they do engage. So today we're going to try and find an honest middle path, not play the game to win at any cost, not opt out and cling to your integrity, something in between, conscious, values-based, and strategic. And as I've said, we've got 4 brilliant coaches to help us work this through and show us what it actually looks like in practice. So I hope you're all joining now, because it always takes people a few moments to get here and get in the zone and have used the technology. But here's the format for today. We're going to do 2 rounds of questions with our coaches. So each coach gets a tailored question in round 1 and then a second question tailored to them in round 2. So we'll hear all of their voices, and then there'll be a bit of time to answer your questions. But do keep an eye on the chat throughout. Add your questions, your comments, your tools, your tricks, and we will feed those into the discussion. And also let us know who you are, because we can't see without you actually saying hello. We don't see who's watching and who's participating. So we want to hear your voice. We want to see who's here. We want you to be part of this conversation. So right, let's meet our fantastic coaches. Jess, I'd love to start with you.
Thanks, Jenny. Hello, everybody. I'm Jessica Rogers. I'm an executive and leadership coach, and I've been doing this work for over 16 years, which actually surprises me a little when I say it out loud. So I work with leaders across professional services, financial services, media, public sector, and the charity sector. And a lot of my focus is on inclusive leadership and supporting people in the workplace. And before all of this, I actually spent a decade in marketing management. So I've sat on both sides of the table as a person navigating the workplace, and now as a person helping others to navigate it. And last year, I wrote my first book, Healing and Hopeful: From Setbacks to Stepping Stones. And it's really about exactly what the title says, the idea that the hardest moments in our careers and our lives don't have to be the end of the story, and actually they can be the foundation for something better. So that's a bit about me, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Oh, thank you so much, Jess. Yeah, everyone rush out and buy that book. It's a very inspiring. Patience, over to you.
Oh, hi. I just had to put on my microphone. Hello, my name is Patience Ogumbono, and I'm an executive leadership and confidence coach. I have been doing it, maybe I'm a baby at it, but I've been doing it for about 8 years, prior to that, I was in the corporate space. I finished off my career in financial services as an internal auditor, a chartered internal auditor. However, I have experience in hospitality, financial services, public sector, and typically my clients come from those areas as well as universities and government organizations as well. So in terms of the niche where I work and focus on, I focus a lot on experienced introverted women leaders, helping them to embody quiet confidence, leading them to be able to achieve magnetic presence and courageous leadership. And I also work with organizations that really want to create inclusive leadership pipelines, not just in terms of personalities, but in terms of strengths, and making sure that they're sustainable and strategic with that. And I've also written a book, which I will talk about as we go ahead to talk about the different questions that we'll be answering today on office politics. I can identify a lot with what we're going to be talking about because as an introvert, I've had to navigate that space and find my own way. And I captured a lot of strategies within my book as well. So I'll be sharing about that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Over to you, Hira.
Thank you. So my name is Hira Ali, as already introduced. I'm an executive coach. I'm a leadership development and allyship specialist and speaker. I'm founder of a company called Advancing Your Potential, where we champion allyship programs and inclusive talent management initiatives. I'm a writer, so you'll often find me in newspapers and different publications calling out all sorts of isms and phobias. And I'm the award-winning author of 2 books, Her Way to the Top, A Guide to Smashing the Glass Ceiling, and Her Allies, a practical toolkit to help men lead through advocacy. And I know I've been saying this for too long, but I do have 2 more books coming, hopefully soon. And I've done lots of workshops and trainings and coaching in a plethora of organizations in the public and private sector. But I think my claim to fame has been allyship and cultural intelligence.
Wonderful. Lovely. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Jay.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. I'm Jay Jupp. I am an award-winning executive and leadership coach, specializing in culture and performance. And I started coaching back in 1998, believe it or not. I know I don't look old enough. For more than 25 years, I've combined coaching with working inside organizations in learning, leadership, talent and organizational development roles, including head of talent and organizational development. So I've come to this conversation from a few different sides as well. And I've been the person trying to work out how to be heard. And I've been in senior roles where decisions are being shaped, often outside of any formal meeting. And I've coached people who are trying to navigate influence without feeling like they have to become someone else. And what sits at the heart of my work now is a simple question. What are the conditions that help people contribute, perform and grow? Because performance is never just about the person. It's also about the leadership around them, the culture they're working in, the access they have, and whether it feels safe to speak honestly. And that directly links into office politics, because when decisions are unclear or access is unequal or challenge doesn't quite feel safe, politics becomes the workaround. So good to be here, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Jay. And thank you, everyone. Everyone listening, you can see we have an amazing lineup, don't we? We're going to get some fantastic responses to our questions today, and such quality coaches in our midst. I want to say hello to Kenny, who's joining us from Nigeria. Fantastic that you're able to reach us today, Kenny. I hope it will be really valuable. And any insights from the continent of Africa will be most welcome. I'm actually going to Ghana in November, my first time. So I'm very excited about that. And I actually, so many books, we'll have to get them in the chat because there's so many books to share, but also wanted to share mine. I've written 2 books, but my next one is coming out in October called AI for Equity, which I've written with my daughter. So do look that up as well. So straight into politics. And I'm going to ask you, Jess, first. Starting with you, because you use a phrase on your website that I think reframes today's topic really beautifully. You talk about villages, that we're challenged, shaped, and fulfilled by our villages, and that leadership is about nurturing more inclusive, more empowering, and more collaborative ones. So my opening question to you is, office politics, is it just really the ugly name we give to the very human, very legitimate work of finding your place in your village? And if we reframed it that way, as village building rather than politics, what changes about how we approach it, do you think?
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Jenny. So I think you're right. You know, the word politics really has got a bad reputation because it implies that kind of manipulation, hidden agenda, and perhaps even working against people rather than with them. And I actually think when we reframe it to finding your place, understanding who holds influence, building trust so that it's less about manipulation and more about understanding, it becomes more about belonging. And if you think most villages or communities will have elders or those who are connectors, people who set the tone, and workplaces have this too. So whether this is something that a role somebody has designated in an org chart or not, there are people who fulfill those roles in the workplace. And so I think when you think about your place in the village rather than maybe office politics, the key is to think about how you can contribute. So whilst politics might be seen as that form of competition or winning, if we take a village perspective, it's more about connection. It's about collaboration. It's about asking yourself that question, you know, how can I contribute and how can I add value? And so I think when you speak about politics, people in my experience, particularly women, or those who are new to the workplace or those from marginalized backgrounds, they can feel like they're being fake. And I think you said that in your intro, particularly if you're values driven, it feels like, you know, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm staying away. I want to be true to myself. But actually, the reframe is really that it's not about being fake. It's about being strategic. And I'd like to give you an example, if I may. There was somebody I was working with recently, and she was promoted to a really big role and moved to a new team. And she'd always prided herself on getting on with everyone and always being the go-to person. But actually, in this elevated role, you know, while she was really keen to remain helpful in this new team and keep that reputation, actually in this role, she needed to be more strategic because it was a bigger job. It took more time, took more energy. And so she really wrestled with not being able to be everything to everyone. And so through our work together, what she was able to do was really to articulate what really mattered to her and the wider difference that she wanted to make. And so in so doing, she really identified the key relationships that she needed to cultivate and how she could do this while really still delivering to her high standards. But what that meant, though, was learning to say no at the risk of not being liked, and also making the conversations that she had with people of influence really count. And so she had to reconcile with really positioning herself differently in the team so that she could add real value to the wider team in her role, really fulfill that bigger role. So I think that making this kind of shift is political. And it's really by identifying that wider benefit, looking at community, looking at collaboration, looking at her place in the village, really. And I think when thinking from that perspective, it makes that shift sit a bit more comfortably with someone particularly who's values driven, and sit more comfortably in thinking about, you know, how you want to show up, how you want to benefit others, and what you want your brand or, you know, your reputation to be.
What a wonderful example. And, nothing about that felt manipulative or fake or any of those things. I want to draw on your 3 C's: connection, collaboration, and contribution. If we called it that, everyone would be up for office politics, because there are things that we all want in work. And this idea, where do we position ourselves for connection, collaboration, and contribution, is what you're offering as an answer there, which I really, really love. So what a great start, Jess. Thank you. I also want to say hello. We, I think, have the most global audience we've had in a while. We have Charlotte from North Carolina. We have someone from Edinburgh. Your name doesn't come up, but has asked for the links for all the books. So if it's possible, Tanya, a bit of searching for everyone's links would be wonderful. We've got Jaya, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, from Bristol here as well. And we also have someone from Manchester. So thank you all for joining us, wherever you are, within the UK, United Kingdom, or beyond. It's really great to have you here. And Jess has really kicked us off well. So I want to now come to you, Patience. You specialize in something right at the center of today's topic. You coach experienced introverted women leaders to unapologetically own that quiet confidence that they have already earned, so they can embody magnetic presence. I think we all want to know how to have magnetic presence and courageous leadership. And you've got a line that I really like. Leadership is not about how loudly you speak, but about how powerfully you show up. But there is a tension. Traditional office politics rewards the loudest in the room, the person who works that drinks reception. If you're introverted, that game, it feels rigged from the start. So talk to us about how the introvert's actual advantage in this. How do quieter people build real influence without pretending to be the extroverts they're not?
Yes, thank you for that. I mean, Jess has set it up nicely by saying office politics is all about the influence. It's all about the relationships, and it's all about the perception that some people are in and some people are out. There is also that. So it's about navigating those social activities that are happening, the conversations around the coffee machine in the kitchen, all those things that you find yourself. Many introverts might find themselves being too exhausted already by the work environment to actually engage in some of those social things and find themselves being excluded. So you can also class those kind of things as networking. But when I was writing my book and exploring my own journey and the journey of many of my clients, for example, working with some of the CEOs and the CEOs that I've worked with, and then climbing up to the ladder and recognizing that at that level, it's not just about your expertise. You can't say I don't play politics. You've got to pay attention to what is happening around you. I coined the phrase, which in my book, The Aligned Introvert Method, and it's in chapter 18, I coined the phrase networking. So while networking is all about the transactional elements of networking, and it's all building that your network around the place to create your influence, that can exhaust introverts. That can cause your battery to run down. And what happens when your battery runs down, basically, is your influence reduces, your presence reduces. So that makes you feel less influential. It's what I tend to call being lost in the crowd, right? So, but networking is totally different. Networking builds on your inner. That's why I talk about the quiet confidence element. That your inner worth that you already know you carry. And then how do you bring that inner worth in a relational way, intentionally, through one-to-one connections? And you then need to also consider building strategic depth over what I call scattered breadth. So strategic is the word that I will use when it comes to politics. So instead of thinking of it in the negative sense of being corny, think about it as I am a strategist, designing the relationships that will be aligned to what I do. And that means that you understand how you go deeper and how you go more one-to-one, how you transform from transactional relationships to reciprocity, to collaboration, and making sure that you identify those people. So with networking, there are 5 key relationships that you build. You have your peer groups, you have your information hubs. So you try to understand what's happening in the workplace. And your advantage here is that quietness in itself, because when you're quiet, you tend to lean more towards observation. It's very typical to find identify introverts by how much they are looking at people and watching things go by and just being quiet and in their own space. But it's how you use that information strategically, and maybe the rooms that you position yourself in to be able to gain the information. So you're not going to go for breadth, you're going to go for depth. Specific rooms, specific environments, specific relationships, peers, and what have you. So the tiered kind of five level process is what I captured as a framework for what I call networking.
Love that. Thank you. So not networking, networthing, and your worth is at the heart of it. So really love it. And also this idea of having the different strategies and being a strategist. This is about not just going with the flow. It's about saying, actually, I'm strategically thinking about who I am, how I show up, how I engage with others, the relationships I build for the future. And this is just about being planful, actually, and seeing the big picture. And again, wouldn't we recommend people to do that, especially our politicians? I think, that long-term thinking, that planning for the future is what we would want everyone to do. So we should want it for ourselves as well. So thank you for coining some new terms for us there. Really, really helpful. And, there are a big percentage of us who get our energy from inside and are not extrovert and need time to observe, to reflect, to refill. I think organizations would make us think we're the minority, but actually I think it's a high percentage of people. So your advice is really valuable. So Hira, moving to you. You've written 2 books that speak directly to today's topic. You mentioned them earlier, Her Way to the Top and about smashing the glass ceiling, and Her Allies, about how men can advocate for women. But I'm going to ask you a tough question. The standard advice for office politics is to show up as yourself and be authentic. But we know from research and lived experience that authenticity is read differently depending on your identity. A Black woman being direct is often labeled differently to a white man being direct. An immigrant being ambitious can be read differently to someone from the majority culture. So how do you help someone be politically savvy and authentic when the rules aren't always actually the same for everyone? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
Great. So thank you so much, Jenny. I think that's a very important question, because when you are not part of the majority, almost everything you do is interpreted differently. And I think many people from underrepresented or global majority backgrounds are already code switching. They're covering up to be more acceptable, and they suppress their natural communication style or adopt a more animated, polished, and restrained version of themselves just to fit in the environment. And when you have to do that constantly, it can be deeply exhausting. But I would also gently challenge the idea that any of us is exactly the same person in every setting, irrespective of our identity. I think our office self is different from our weekend self. We communicate differently with a close friend, a client, a senior leader, or an audience, right? And research suggests that all of us, we adapt to a certain degree. So I would flip the question and ask, is adapting always such a bad thing? And I use the word adaptable, not fake. And I know Jess had pointed this out, not to be fake, how to be more value-driven. So to be able to read the room and flex your style, to dial something up or tone something down, I think it's the heart of being politically savvy. So, for example, when I'm doing my public speaking, I project my voice in a different way. It's louder and it's more projected than my conversational voice. And it's not that I'm inauthentic in either situation, right? I'm simply drawing on on that facet of myself which best serves that particular moment. So I think what we do need to understand is authenticity does not mean saying whatever you want, whenever you want, without considering the context or the impact. And nor does it mean not refusing to evolve your style. It means it does remain, to Jess's point, you need to remain anchored in your values while choosing how best to express them. So I think it's not you're not being someone else, but when you're being politically savvy, you're just bringing forward the part of yourself that is most relevant and effective in that situation. And in our work, Jenny, we talk about authentic chameleon, right? So I, being a South Asian, I always say this, I initially resisted the phrase because in South Asia culture, calling someone a chameleon can suggest that they're flaky or they're not trustworthy. But over time, I think I've learned to see it differently because it can mean having the emotional intelligence and the cultural awareness to move between environments without losing your core identity. Of course, the difficulty is that people from the global majority and underrepresented groups, they often have to think about this far more than others, right? They may enter a room carrying a whole set of preconceived assumptions about how someone like them is expected to speak, how someone like them is expected to lead or to behave. So I do think the responsibility should never sit entirely with the individual. Organizations and leaders also need to examine what they can do to help people feel more authentic. Because sometimes I think a lot of this burden of authenticity is on how people can adapt, what people can do. Now, on an individual level, I would suggest three things. I think first, to be your authentic self, what you need to do is first prepare and understand the room. Who will be there? What matters to them? What is the purpose of the conversation? And how can you frame your message so that it lands? The second thing is to seek regular and specific feedback, so that other people's perceptions do not come as a complete surprise, right? Not all feedback will be fair, and you don't have to accept all of it, but it does give you very valuable and useful information from which you can make an intentional choice. And finally, build your own board of advisors, trusted mentors, your peers, your allies, sponsors who can help you practice and refine your approach and distinguish between useful feedback and biased feedback. And I think sponsors and allies are particularly important because they can also advocate for you in rooms where you're not present and challenge the double standards being applied. So I think for me, being political savvy and authentic are not opposites. Political savvy is about understanding the system. Authenticity is about knowing what you will not compromise on within it. And the goal is not to shrink yourself to fit every room. It's just being skillful enough to navigate the room while remaining rooted in who you essentially are.
Thank you so much. Really, really helpful. That point that you've made, which is being adaptive a bad thing? No, we're adapting all the time. And it's about adapting, but also keeping the core of who we are. And that can really help us navigate our organizational life. So absolutely love that. Just want to give a few shout outs. Rabia in London, lovely to see you here. Maynaz, friend of the Diverse Executive Coach Directory, great to see you here. Also Epi from Manchester and Kelly from Kenilworth, welcome. And please do feel free to add comments or questions into the chat. We always love to hear from you. So Jay, I want to speak to you. I'm putting you in a slightly different seat for this. You have had corporate roles, been a head of talent and OD. You've coached many leaders and enabled organizations and teams to gain so much. So you've seen office politics from both sides. What are the specific things senior leaders can do? Not the DEI statement, not the training program, but actual behaviors that would level the playing field of informal influence in an organization.
Thank you, Jenny. Yes, in my introduction, I mentioned conditions, and I think this is a lens that can be really useful here. So we've kind of talked about office politics is often treated as a problem with the individual, right? Somebody's protecting their fiefdom or, trying to get ahead or playing games. And we know that that is happening, but people can also be adapting to the conditions around them. So when decisions are unclear, access is unequal, challenge doesn't feel safe, people start finding those informal routes to influence. So they try and work out who really has the power, who they need to speak to before a meeting or an event, and what can be said openly and what can only be said privately. And that's where, for me, the office, the politics can become the workaround. And I saw this myself in one organisation I worked in, and we'd spent quite a lot of money training all of the leaders and managers, including the executive team in DE&I. And at a large managers conference event that we had, the CEO made a public comment about senior leaders hearing disability. That created quite a lot of discomfort. Afterwards, though, a lot of managers kind of came to me privately and asked me how I felt about it, and whether the training had been worth it, had made the difference. But there was only one person who put their feelings in the formal feedback survey. Later, I was asked to identify that person. I know, horrendous. I said no, because the survey was intentionally confidential. But I also said, I think we're missing the point here. The issue isn't who wrote it. The issue is that lots of people noticed this, didn't like it, but only one person felt comfortable in putting it in writing. So that told us something about the conditions. There was a formal route, but people didn't necessarily trust it enough to use it. And in that case, they probably were right not to. So they went underground, found a different route to express their thoughts and feelings. So senior leaders for me have a big responsibility. So there are 3 takeaways for me for senior leaders here. First, make decision-making more visible. Be clear about what is genuinely up for debate and discussion. Be honest about what's really already been decided. Who is involved, what criteria did you use, and how the feedback will be used. Because a lot of politics happen because people are left guessing about this process or these processes. They don't know whether they're being invited to shape something or simply endorse the decision that's already been made. So second, I think being deliberate about the voices that enter the room. So look around yourself as a senior leader. Who do you always hear from? Who do you rarely hear from? Whose ideas get traction, and who is present but really not included? And then actively create a space to allow for people to contribute. So ask for people's views, not as an afterthought, but because you genuinely want it. Plan for it and make time for it. I would say give people different routes to respond, because everyone is different, and Patience has painted a wonderful picture of that people have access before, during and after those meetings or critical events, because not everyone thinks best in the moment or wants to compete for airtime. And if leaders only hear from people who are the quickest, the loudest, or the most confident, they are often risking mistaking visibility for value. And thirdly, I would say protect challenge, especially when it's uncomfortable about you. So it's easy to welcome challenge. And I've heard a lot of people say that, please do challenge me. But the real test is how you show up and respond when they do. So sometimes they might question your behavior or a decision and something you care about. So as a senior leader, are you listening without becoming defensive? Are you protecting that confidentiality? To the example I gave, focus on the substance rather than who said what, and show people that you've heard what they've said and how it's influenced or changed as a consequence. Otherwise, people quickly learn that honesty has quite a heavy price tag. So for me, this isn't just about the individual, being told to be more politically savvy. It's also about senior leaders creating clearer, fairer and safer conditions for contribution. Because when people understand how decisions are made, when a wider range of voices are genuinely heard, and when challenge is protected, people can spend less energy navigating hidden rules and more energy contributing and performing. So that's what I would say.
Fantastic. A clarion cry for senior leaders to step up and create the environments where everyone can thrive. Thank you so much, Jay. I want to say hi to Wakar. Apologies if I pronounced your name incorrectly. And also Rita, lots of you joining us today. And also Catherine from North Wales. Great to see you all here and all the interaction. Lovely. And I can also see that Tanya has now provided links to all the authors' books, which I encourage you to buy, share, tell the world about them. Actually, I think I'm going to go back to Jess. You mentioned at the beginning networking as village building, which was a really beautiful reframe. But actually building a network, showing up, following up, staying connected, it's hard work. It takes real time and energy that a lot of people don't have. What are the highest leverage things people actually need to do? And where do people waste effort thinking they're networking when they're actually not? What do you think, Jess?
Oh, we get asked this question so much, particularly when delivering program modules, because people just feel like it's another thing to add to their day job. So I've got some sort of key tips, and I'd start with LinkedIn, because we're here on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a great tool, but it's really important to not just collect contacts and think about how you can build relationships. So remember that LinkedIn connection you've got, just because you've clicked accept or you've sent them some, a connection request and they've clicked accept, that's not a relationship. It's about showing up. It's about interacting with people's posts, really nurturing the relationships. And I can tell you from personal experience that really does pay off. And it's consistency. So just a few minutes a day, have a look at what your contacts are saying, interact. Just like something if you like it, share your perspective, share your point of view. All of those little things make a really big difference because they have a real ripple effect. So I'd say that's a real sort of less effort but high yield thing you can do. But it's really important to have patience with it. Don't expect results overnight. And I think the other thing when it comes to networking is sometimes people can use networking as an opportunity to chase senior connections, because they want that visibility. But actually building relationships with your peers and people throughout your career is what's really key, because that's what develop into long-term relationships. So from that peer-to-peer support, to sort of the different support as time goes on, because people move on, people move up. So just remember that the day-to-day conversations that you're having with your peers, with your team, that's all networking. Because I've got people that I've worked alongside years ago who are now referring me for work to this day. And it's all about just those day-to-day interactions and conversations. And I think the key thing about networking is don't treat it as a transaction. So don't be that person who just shows up when they need something, because all that is erode trust. So, in those conversations, share something about yourself, what you're working on, and ask the person in front of you about themselves as well. And listen and remember what they've told you and follow up as well. Following up is really, really key. If somebody's told you something that's important to them, make yourself a little diary note or a mental note to follow up with them. Ask them how it's gone, because that's how you build that trust. That's how you build relationship as well. So building your network, ongoing, rather than building a network when you're having a crisis or when you really need something. That's about building your village. Yeah, it's an ongoing thing. It's not like a one-time I network and that's it, I get what I want. So think of it as building, I think to Patient's point, building deeper, smaller number of deeper relationships rather than just having this massive room of kind of shallow relationships or shallow conversations. So I think, if you think of, we talked about politics, this conversation's about politics. If you think about politics is kind of building your village and that connection and that collaboration, networking is tending to your village. So like building the relationships, tending to those relationships, and it's a long-term thing, not just a one-time hit.
Love that. Thank you so much, Jess. So much good advice there. I hope people were scribbling it all down very, very quickly. Patience. So you're a Maxwell DISC consultant and emotional intelligence trainer. So you literally coach people on reading others' personalities. Can you give us, a little masterclass, a little bit of advice in the moment? How do you adjust your influencing style when you're trying to persuade someone very different from you? And what do introverts specifically need to know about how they land with more assertive personality types?
Yes, thank you. So basically, being a Maxwell DISC consultant and emotional intelligence just means that it's tools that you can actually use effectively to navigate office politics. With emotional intelligence, the very first thing is you start with your own self-awareness. And for me, I think when it comes to politics, when we see it in the real world, we notice that the person that has the mic, the person that shouts the loudest, and things like that also gets noticed. And the person that is divisive as well can also attract a lot of attention sometimes, because it's more like they're bringing out the negatives or saying certain things. So one of the things I think about when it comes to all of this is also thinking about the senior leaders. As Jay mentioned, they have a role to play in how communication is disseminated across the organization, and how that leads to influence. And sometimes when I'm coaching my clients, I would make them aware that you've gone through the process and sometimes contributed to the way the politics there exists. So you might get to the top now and try to refine, and your role now is to refine what has got you to the top there. Might not be able to keep you there. A different type of politicking is existing there. So I think when it comes to the DISC versus emotional intelligence, one of the core areas is learning to communicate effectively. So with the DISC that I do, the Maxwell DISC, it analyzes your core personality, and it analyzes your communication style, how you communicate with others, and how you choose to receive communication. It also encourages how you can get feedback. I know one of us mentioned feedback here, the 360-degree effect. And being able to be aware of how to communicate effectively with the different personalities around you is important. But of course, you don't go into a meeting with everybody's DISC result. You don't go into a meeting with your own. But I always encourage my clients, and I have a process of onboarding my clients where they take their DISC. I call it Discover Your Strengths. So there, you already have that information. But then how do you use the information? And what are the key elements? So with DISC, you have the DISC, D being dominant and direct. So when you think about how do I relate to this person, because a core part of politics is also relationship. This person wants the bottom line. They don't want the preamble. They don't want the stories. But then you come to the I. The I wants the stories. They want the stories before the data. And then the S wants safety and wants time to process. Typically, a lot of introverts tend to fall into the S category, partly because of that time to process. They don't want you to just dump something on them. They want time to process, whether in the meeting. And then the C wants evidence. They're not just going to trust you on your gut. So if you're going to be strategic about the relationships you're building and how that would work, then you need to understand these personalities. And by so doing, what you do is you adjust your tone, your pace, the content you deliver, and how you build relationships with each of these personalities, just sensing the room, being intuitive as much as you can be, and being observational, building on your strengths. Yeah.
Wonderful. That was a fantastic masterclass. And people can come back to you if they want to know more about DISC, emotional intelligence and influencing, and particularly as someone who has an introverted preference. I'm going to come back to you, Jay, actually, and pulling on your life work collisions work, your signature framework about how leadership happens while you're also raising children, caring for parents, navigating menopause, grief, or redundancy. So playing office politics well takes energy, attention, capacity. A lot of people watching are carrying heavy loads right now. Would you say to someone who just doesn't have the bandwidth for the political game at the moment? Do they opt out temporarily? Do they play a smaller game? How do they protect what matters? And I think this is a really important question.
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks, Jenny. The thing I want to normalize here is that everybody has seasons and everybody has life and work that collide at different points in time. So when you genuinely have no bandwidth, that doesn't necessarily mean, you need to disappear. I think there's being a bit more deliberate and a bit more strategic about what you do and where you put your time and effort. And I think, people telling you just that you need to be more visible and you network more and build more relationships just can be overwhelming and can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And I think that's what organizations get wrong. And I said it previously, that we confuse visibility with value, we confuse availability with commitment, and we confuse current capacity with long-term potential. So someone may still be ambitious, they still care deeply about the work that they do, and they still want to progress. They just might not have the energy to perform that ambition in the way that an organization recognizes. So I would not tell them to disappear, and I would not tell them to keep playing the whole game. So as a coach, you can help them become more deliberate. So who are the few relationships that really matter right now? Which meetings or conversations genuinely need your voice? What does good enough visibility look like right now? And what can be paused or delegated or dropped? And what are they actually trying to protect? Is it their health, their energy, their role, their reputation, or their values? And knowing that can be really helpful. Sorry, I was just hearing a little bit of noise there. And it's just about finding that minimum level that's effective and being okay with not being everywhere. But there's something else about what we might tell ourselves when we do that, so that we fear that if we step back, we'll be forgotten. If people might think that we are less committed, or will we lose everything that we've built so far? And those fears are understandable, but they can push people into overextending, and obviously that has significant consequences, and we don't want that to happen. We just want them to make conscious choices. And I think the responsibility sits not just with the individual. Leaders need to ask whether their culture rewards this constant availability, being on all the time, after hours access, and being visibly present in every conversation. Because if that's how influence works, people who are carrying those heavy loads in those moments will be disadvantaged. So the aim is not to play the smaller game. The aim is to not play the smaller game. It's to play a more deliberate game, to protect your energy, stay connected at what matters, and not to let difficult seasons, as I've called them, become permanent judgments about value or potential. And reduced capacity does not mean reduced capability.
Thank you so much. It was a really important question, and I love the way you handled it. And it's partly, quality over quantity, but also intentionality, and just recognizing how much have you got to give. And so with what I have to give, where do I put it? And I really like that approach. And I think it's very practical and I'm sure very helpful. Okay, Hira. So we're going to end really on your question. Your book, Her Allies, is specifically about how men can lead through advocacy for women. So this is the ally question. Thinking about it, though, from the other side, if someone watching wants powerful people in their corner, genuine allies who'll open doors, but is worried about looking like they're using people or they're cheating, what's the difference between building genuine ally relationships and being a bit fake? What is that line?
I think that's a wonderful question. I think so many people we coach, they shy away from building alliances or asking for support because it feels self-serving. But I think interests, just to be clear, to a certain extent, that is what navigating office politics involves, right? Many of us, particularly women and people from certain cultural backgrounds, we've been conditioned not to ask for too much. We're taught to be humble, grateful, accommodating, and not to appear demanding. And I think those values may serve us well in some parts of life, but the workplace is different. You need to be able to ask for support, for opportunities, for introductions, because people cannot always anticipate what you need. I do believe this, and I say this a lot. Your workplace is not a doting parent who will keep feeding you and offering you food even when you've said you're full. So if you do not communicate what you want, you simply will not receive it, right? But of course, there's a way to do it without being transactional. And I think all three coaches have already mentioned this, right? It's not about using people. For me, the key difference is reciprocity. I think Patience pointed to that, sincerity and consistency, right? General relationships are not built only when you need something. As Jess said, you invest in time in them over time. You stay in touch. You remember people during their good and difficult times, and you take an interest in their work, often encouraging them or looking for opportunities to support them too. A lot of people I coach, they say, oh, but I'm junior. What could I possibly offer someone more senior, powerful? And there's almost always something you can contribute. It could be it could be some useful research and insight into a particular community or emerging issue. You could help with a project. You can offer an introduction or simply publicly acknowledging someone's contributions, giving them a shout out on LinkedIn, perhaps. Reciprocity does not mean that both people must offer the same thing, but it does mean that both people must bring value to the relationship. And I love Jay's advice. It's so amazing that you don't have to always make sure that you're building relationships consistently and always be there. So you don't necessarily need to play the small game, Jay said, but a deliberate game. So focus on a few strategic relationships that will matter rather than just thinking of adding contacts on LinkedIn all the time. And a lot of people, for example, on LinkedIn say, oh, but nobody engaged with my post, nobody liked it, and I say, did you do that? And they're like, no, we didn't. So how can people engage with you, right? So my rule is, give before you ask, wherever you reasonably can, because follow someone's work, engage thoughtfully and consistently. But I also want to point something out. This does not mean that you have to spend years proving yourself before you are even allowed to ask for help, right? Because reciprocity sometimes can become another exhausting burden, particularly for someone who already has no access or influence. Sometimes I think you genuinely need support before you have the opportunity to give anything back, and that's all right. In that situation, you can still approach the person with honesty, with respect, and an acknowledgement of their time. I think the line between a genuine ally relationship and being fake is usually intention behavior. So are you only appearing when you want something, or do you disappear once you receive it? Or are you only pretending to be interested in someone because of their status or what they can offer you? I believe that if your relationship is two-way, and you value the person as well as the access they provide, then it works out better. And I also do want to highlight one thing finally, is that, yes, I talk about, allyship and reciprocity and all of that. It is important to remember that allyship is not a favor bestowed by a powerful person on someone less powerful. I think a genuine ally does believe in your ability and understands the barriers you may face and uses their influence to help create fairer access. But you still have a role, obviously, in helping them understand understand your goals. Even the most supportive ally cannot advocate effectively if they do not know what you want, right? So do not assume that asking makes you an opportunist. A respectful ask gives someone the opportunity to support you. The answer may be no, but that does not make the request inappropriate. I think the goal is not to avoid self-interest, it's to combine self-interest with with integrity, with genuine human connection.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hira. We're really at time already. We didn't get any additional questions, but really I think that's because the answers from our wonderful coaches were so comprehensive, and we've really looked at this from many different angles. I want to say a huge thank you to Jess, to Patience, to Hira and Jay. 4 brilliant lenses on the topic most people would rather not talk about, but now I think they will. They'll think about it as connection, collaboration, contribution. They'll think about net worthing. They'll think about being a strategist. They'll think about building their community and nurturing it. They'll think about being adaptive and that not being a bad thing. So there's just so much, and they'll know that this is for everyone. It's for people who are minoritized in some way. It's for people who are time poor. It's for people who find it difficult to network because they're introverted. Whoever you are, you can be really thinking and navigating the political landscape of your workplace. So I hope you got so much from that conversation. I think it was hugely valuable. And if you'd like to work with any of our amazing coaches, then head to the Diverse Executive Coach Directory. My colleague Tanya, I believe, has already put the link in the chat, but she might add it again. And I hope you found this event valuable. If you did, and you weren't one of the people who donated in order to come along, please do feel free to donate to Rocking Your Teens, the social enterprise that supports young people to increase their aspirations and be also inspired. And there'll be a link in the chat for that. So our next in the series of How a Coach Can Help will be taking place on the 17th of September. We're having a break during August. And it's how a coach can help me pinpoint my next career move when I feel stuck. So really specific. So many people feel stuck in their career, don't know how to get out. Maybe they've got the golden handcuffs. Maybe they just feel that they don't know what else they would do. We're going to share from our coach's experience how to help you. And it's hugely valuable. So do subscribe to our Eventbrite channel to be the first to hear about any of our sessions. And you can also book onto them right away. And also, we always want your feedback. Did this work for you? Is there something else you'd like us to cover in the future? What would make things better? We're interested in that response too. And we've got a 1-minute survey that we'd love you to complete. So again, thank you to our coaches. Thank you everyone for being here, whether you're in Nigeria, in the US, in Wales, in Manchester, in Bristol, wherever you were. I hope you found the advice, the encouragement, the inspiration useful. And we'd love to know how you get on. So do let us know what you put in place and the difference it makes for you. And do share this LinkedIn Live widely, so we can help as many people as possible. Thanks so much. It's been awesome. And we'll see you in September. Take care, everyone.